Hi, Marianne. I'm excited to be here again, and we're going to have an amazing podcast today. We talked with David Bredbenner, who wrote a book called Going Home, A Journey with Dementia, and he talks about his mother, and just a wonderful story. And he's so relatable as a son, caring for his mother, but also a lot of family stuff comes up, and how all of that plays out. But and he's just a fascinating guy, a poet and a writer now.
A
Other
techie
things.
guy, don't forget. Made his
He's a
career in
techie guy
tech, so he's
for
like
sure.
he's using both sides of his brain.
He's a Renaissance man,
He is a
which I
Renaissance man.
love. Anyway,
He
but
is.
it's good stuff
He's
in
a
this
lovely
one.
soul, and he
Yeah,
has a lot of wisdom to share. And I enjoyed his turn of phrase. He has a nice, eloquent way of speaking
yeah.
and exchanging some of his ideas. So I think the listeners are going to get a lot out of hearing from Dave. Um, and his book is soon to come out in Audible, so you'll get to hear him read it. So,
And the other interesting thing that I love about his book is the cover is magnificent. It's
hmm
absolutely, it is a piece of artwork. And in fact,
yes.
it is his mother's artwork. His mother sounds like such an amazing woman, and she had lived many lives, nursing and so many other things, but also an accomplished artist. And so the cover is breathtaking. I just found it very stunning. So it's wonderful.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, this will be a great episode. I think everybody will get lots out of it, and Al's Authors is really busy right now. We've got lots going on with this 10th anniversary year. So, Marianne, what are some of the things coming up?
Well, you mentioned that Dave is a poet, and we are doing a poetry reading on April 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with a number of the poets who are in our organization. This will be the third year.
Yeah,
So we invite our listeners to come join us for that. You'll find the information on the website, AlzAuthors.com. And you can sign up and to save your seat so you get the link when we're going to go live. And it's even if you're not sure about poetry or you don't really participate with poetry readings or read or write poetry, you will learn a lot and gain a lot from
yeah.
attending some of this reading and hearing other people's stories. And it can be very moving.
Yeah, it's amazing how much poetry can touch us in so many
Mhm.
big ways, small ways, but it just hits us in a different way. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
And we have some other things coming up. Tell us about the giveaway. That's always
Oh,
cool. That's always great.
yeah. In celebration of the 10th anniversary, we're giving away a mini custom caregiver collection every month this year. And what that means is if you're the winner, you get to choose. We're going to send you 3 books on the topic of your choice. So if you're looking for caring for mom books or caring for your husband or children's books, you tell us what you're looking for and you will receive that package in the mail. We can only ship to the US, so we apologize to our international listeners. But that would be a great prize for any caregiver or anyone who wants to make a donation to a care facility or a support group or anything like that. And all you need to do is enter the giveaway once, and you are in it for the whole year. And you can find information on that on our website on the homepage at allsauthors.com. Yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah, I'm excited about that. And on April 22nd, we have our Books and Chit Chat with Aging and Amazing. And our author this month is Marita Golden, and her book is called The Wide Circumference of Love. It's a novel. So would love to see everybody come out for that. And I mean, the book is lovely, and I'm sure you would love the book, but if you don't have time to read, we understand. And you can come, even if you haven't read the book, and meet Marita and listen to her story and listen to our conversation. And then,
Yeah.
of course, you can get the book later and you can read it or listen to it. I think it's available in audiobook as well. She's a very well-known, accomplished author. So that is something to look forward to.
It's exciting. It's
And
great.
then lastly, at the end of this podcast, we do have a mini pod. And this time we're talking to Norms McNamara, whom some people may be familiar with as the leader of the Purple Angels.
Hmm.
And also, his organization founded the memory cafes in
Yes.
England, which have managed to like take over the world. I think
Yeah.
there are like 1,500 of them in the United States, he said. So they have come up with a new project, which is called the World Walk Against Dementia on September 7th. And this is a global event right now. He said 23 countries.
Right.
But anybody can participate in the walk no matter where they are. It doesn't have to be this big organized thing. You can just grab your support group or your neighbors or whoever, your family, and do like a walk around town or in the park and call that your walk against dementia. So he
Yeah.
has a lot to tell us about that. So if you stay tuned at the end of the podcast, you'll hear Norm's story.
Oh, that's great. This is a jam-packed podcast. We are
Mm-hmm.
loving it. It's great. And it's so cool that we are doing so many fun things in our 10th year to celebrate all
Yes.
the cool things we do. So, well,
Yes.
let's get to it because this is a great show today. So let's
Okay, let's get
dive in.
started. All right.
Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia. And I'm here with my co-host, Marianne. Hi, Marianne. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Oh, great. Well, we have a wonderful guest with us today, David Bredbenner, who is the author of Going Home, A Journey with Dementia. And it's just a beautiful, first of all, I have to tell you, it's a beautiful cover. And I want him to tell us about that because it's a beautiful book just to pick up, feels like a piece of artwork because it is a piece of artwork. And so welcome, David. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, well, we're delighted. And I'm glad that you are here to tell us your story as a son caring for a mother. We get lots of different people on the show, lots of different authors in our group of many, many authors. We have husbands caring for wives and wives caring for husbands and daughters. And it's wonderful to have a son talk to us about his mother and how this impacted you and your journey. So welcome and thank you for sharing this book with the world, and we want to hear more about it. So maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you came to write your book.
Yeah, happy to do so. I'm a technology guy. I've been in technology most of my career. I lived overseas for a bunch of years and have had a very full life in terms of experiencing a lot of things. Um, I would say that some of this is sort of a legacy to my mom because I think early days I started writing poetry when I was maybe in third grade. The first poem I wrote was for my grandfather. It was about age, and my grandfather was a tractor mechanic and Italian, and he met me with this poem. Like it was a very sensitive moment. He's like, "That's beautiful, right?" And you wouldn't have ever expected that from him because he was a big burly guy, and um, so that's kind of where that stemmed. And my mom and my dad had always sort of not allowed for, but encouraged the creativity, right, of writing. And at one point, I think my mom had hoped that I would be a writer, and I took off with other careers because the world says this is what you do, and I did it, and I've done it really well for a long time. But through this journey with dementia, I'm going to say it was probably about maybe 2.5 years before my mom passed. I was on a red eye flight back from Atlanta, and I just thought, this is crazy. I've got to put this down. And I opened up my laptop and I just started writing. And I'm grateful that it was, a nighttime flight because I'm just crying while I'm writing all this stuff because it's such a connected thing. And that began the process of me writing it and writing some poetry along the way that went with it. And after she passed away, I was like, I've got to finish this now, right? And so I started being more adamant about it, but it was very I'm sure as you all know, it's a very difficult thing to write because it is so fraught with emotion. I had been working on the audiobook for at least 6 months with an audio engineer, and between his schedules and my schedules, and reading it and like, oh, crying all over again, right? It's just that it's that quick because it was such a powerful thing. Um, and I think one of the messages I always like to tell people is, it's our society, as I see it, is very good at wanting us to take people with dementia or Alzheimer or any malady, right, and putting them somewhere. and let the professionals take care of this. And sometimes it's just the way it has to be because people don't have the luxury of doing that. I had a job where my world was very flexible, and my sister lived with my mom. And between the two of us, we made it happen. And then we figured out things like caregivers that could come during the day and all these other things that allowed us to do it. But being allowed to do it, it was an absolute gift for me. My publisher said, "Oh, I don't know if anybody's going to believe it was a gift." I'm like, it wasn't just a gift, right? As you guys know, it was pure hell sometimes, a lot of the times. But the more we learned, the better she was able to respond to us because the real key that we discovered throughout this whole thing, there were many, but the number one key is you got to throw logic right out the window
Yeah.
because it doesn't work.
So true. So true. And I do feel like a gift is accurate. You're absolutely correct. I haven't heard anybody say, "Hey, this was a total joy. It was great." It is crazy and hard, and like you said, it can just feel like hell, but boy, on the other side, and even moments of joy that are there. And I think that's what people need to know. It's a full spectrum of all the emotions. So very
Yeah.
well put. So yeah, so tell us more about your mom.
So my mom was just a dynamo. My dad passed away in 2005 from cancer, and I certainly saw my mom grieve, but her art business and all those things, she was like, nothing's going to slow her down, right? And she was a mother of five kids, one of whom was my sister who had passed away, which is sort of the kind of the event that pushed my mom over the edge into full on dementia. Um, but my mom took care of her for 53 years. She was asthmatic, very very ill most of her life, and also just a pistol. I mean, nothing would slow Terry down. She was pretty amazing. So we were a family that was always rallying against whatever came our way, right? And we had a very close family. Christmases and all the holidays were very tight. My parents worked to put us through Catholic school in California because they didn't think the public school systems were good enough. And my mom she was a nurse when my mom and dad got married. Then she became an interior decorator through a house that they were decorating in California. And then she went back to nursing because of the cost of Terry and private schools. Um, and then stayed a nurse. She was probably a nurse for about 40 years. She worked in the ER a lot of the time. And then when we moved to Oregon, she became a cardiac nurse and was very good at it. And at the age of, I think at the age of 58, I'm probably getting that wrong, but she retired and she started painting again. She painted when she was a kid. She did some beautiful drawings of some of their collies and some of their dogs. They lived in rural property near Sacramento and Lodi. And she was very talented, obviously, as a kid, but never did anything with it. And at whatever age that was that she decided to do it when she was nursing, Terry was still at home because she was sick. And my youngest sister was going to school, so she was at home. And I think I was in Japan or someplace. I don't remember where I was at the time, but she started painting, and it was like, encouraging her over the phone, seeing the occasional picture, and it became serious. It became like she became really talented, right? So she started doing art shows. She retired from nursing, and then we would go like she would go to an art show and she would sell $30,000 or $40,000 worth of paintings. Like this is like overnight, right? Just the success was tremendous. And her style, as you can see from the front cover, is mostly impressionism. She played with a lot of different mediums and different things, but she just became this incredibly talented artist. And it was a vehicle for my parents to really have a lot of fun together. They weren't quite empty nesters yet, but probably were likely never to be that with Terry. But they spent a lot of time on the road and going to these shows and had such a good time. It was really a good thing for them. And then, as I mentioned, my dad got cancer. My dad and my mom were very different in that respect. My mom and dad both smoked until they were into their late 40s at least. My mom was a 2-pack a day smoker, and They grew up in the era when nobody knew that was bad. And strangely, with my sister around, I mean, I remember smoking in the house, in the grocery store, like all these crazy things that you can't even imagine today. Um, and my mom quit. And then she started running marathons, like insane. And I think she ran 5 or 6 marathons, right?
Wow.
And she was running about 5 miles a day up until she was almost 80 years old. Um, and the impetus for all this is she took a fall one day. She was walking her dog, Buddy, and I was in town. My sister said, "Oh yeah, you got to come to the ER." I'm like, "What happened?" She was walking her dog, and he just lunged at something and pulled her into a parked car. I'm like, okay, well, this is probably, she's going to be bruised up. She looked like someone took a baseball bat to her. I mean, she had to have pins put in her left hand. It was bad. And I think it was the first time I ever saw my mom look a little frail,
Mm.
right? And I mean, at 79, she's going to live to be 200, right? She was just nonstop, right? Um, and she recovered. Um, but there were some things left behind, some things that went somewhat unnoticed and definitely somewhat not addressed. And I think part of that was my sister Terry, after my dad passed away, was so adamant about caring for dad. Elbows out. I've got this. I'm going to take care of mom. I'm like, okay, and Terry was um, very stubborn. So we didn't want to rock that boat too much. But one of the things I recall about my mom is she went from her normal gait to shuffling. Like, what is going on here, right? So during that period of time, at one point, I think it was a Thanksgiving, I was going to go down and see my brother because my daughter hadn't seen them a lot because we lived in Oregon, and I asked my mom if she wanted to go, and she said, "Oh my God, that'd be lovely." He has a cabin up in the Sierras, and we drove down, and it was different. My mom was an incredibly bright woman. There must be a stack of 5 books on her nightstand all the time. Um, we had deep conversations about our faith, about life, about everything all the time. And it was a very quiet ride. Sophia was in the back drawing, watching movies, and we made it down. And she was super excited to see my brother and his boys and his wife. And one of her sons is a junior fire chief in Arnold. And so she was very excited to go to the fire station and have a Thanksgiving there because she worked with those guys, and she actually rode in paramedic vehicles for a while when she worked in the Bay Area. And it was fascinating. My sister-in-law said, "Hey, Betty, before we go, do you want to change a little bit?" Another like roadside, right? She was just a little disheveled. And we're talking about a lady who always had her hair done, always had her nails done. She bought clothes from Neiman Marcus. She just really liked to look well, right? And her hair was a little messy and her clothes were a little dirty. And Karen sort of fixed her up, and then we did our thing. And then later that evening when we came back, they wanted us to play this game called Catchphrase. And it's one of these little electronic games. It's kind of a cross between charades and oh
Yeah,
shoot.
yeah, it's a fun
Yeah,
game.
anyway.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's
sure.
a very fun game. And she didn't want to play.
Mm.
And I was like, huh, that's kind of odd. And she just sat there and she was really quiet. Um, so nothing major, right? Is she getting older? My brother came out and talked to me and she said, "How's she doing?" I said, "Well, I think she's getting a little older," right? We just kind of chalked it up to that, right? Went home, had a nice Christmas, did all that stuff. Full circle to without any real bumps along the way to July.
Mm.
Um, July is when the devastating thing happened. My sister passed away. She had been in the hospital. I had to go to away for a business trip for do some training stuff, and I told my boss, "Hey, I may have to leave because this is not good this time." She had been on a respirator before we left, had a really bad lung infection that she just wasn't beating, and I came home, nothing had happened, and I went to the hospital. And they said, "Well, we're going to take her off the respirator and we're going to stop all of her drugs." I said, yeah, you can't do that. And they said, well, her husband's here and he gets to make that decision. And I said, well, all due respect, if you do, you're going to have a real problem with me. And let me tell you why. Some of her drugs, if you take them off, she's going to go into convulsions very shortly after, and she's going to have a really miserable death. So the administrator came in, they understood, and they did a titrated version of that, right? So that it wasn't going to be so awful for her. And they said, she's not going to wake up anyway. She woke up and she was awake for 2 days, and I took up residence in the hospital because that's kind of what I do. I did it with my dad and did it with my sister and did it with my mom. It's, just everybody in the family has different roles. That's one that I play. And I was able to kind of be with her. And the last night my sister came up, she had slipped into a coma at that point. And, we, I had actually snuck a bottle of wine in the hospital and called the place to see if we could order a pizza. And they said, yeah, you can. And the charge nurse came in. She goes, did you guys order pizza? I'm like, yeah, we did. She goes, never seen that before in my life. I said, well, we've been in a lot of hospitals, so we're probably not, the norm, right? And so we hung out with Terry while we were suctioning her throat all night long. And about 7:30, I said, Mary, let's go get a cup of coffee. We got to have a cup of coffee. We came back and the CNA was in there and she was checking her blood sugar. And I was like, you don't have to do that.
Hmm. Yeah.
So she passed. I made a point of bringing my mom up because it was important enough to me to see some of the things that had gone on the way that she knew this, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you bring her up and you see this woman who's cared for her for 53 years. And she wasn't horribly emotional.
Your mother?
She was sad, but it looked more like she was a little bit numb.
Mm.
But she said her goodbye and kind of gave her some time there. And then we went home. And I'm like, okay, we've done this. This is important. This will stick now, right? That afternoon, we were sitting outside in her deck, and she made a comment about a bush that she always saw every summer with all these red berries on it. And then she turned and said, you know, don't we have to go see Terry?
Mm.
And that was the beginning.
Yeah.
The emotional stress, the fall, whatever that had sort of supplanted in her,
Right.
the passing of my sister pushed her over the edge, and that began our journey with dementia that has so many different um, ups and downs to it. That it was just crazy. So that was kind of the lead into all of it was that big event.
Wow. Yeah, just it was too hard for her and yeah, just and probably, many times dementia's there and it doesn't really we don't know. We don't know that it's percolating and
Right.
yeah.
People can hide it very, very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Marianne. Is like we're also busy with our lives, and I think to some degree we want to write off those things because if you're close with your family, and I'm super close to my mom as I was with my dad, and so you tend to look beyond those things. Say, hey, mom, it's okay. Don't you forgot that? Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal, right? And it just wasn't prevalent enough that I was like seeing this consistent pattern. And I would literally, whenever I was in town, visit my mom probably 3 days a week, right? And when I was on the road, I would call her. So I felt like, no, she's getting older, but she's okay, right? She had stopped running because post the fall, but there wasn't anything that was terribly telling, right?
Hmm.
Other than those subtle things, which we tend to look beyond. Well, at that point, it was like, life said, no, no, now you really need to know this is real, right? We still didn't know then. We didn't know what dementia was. We didn't know anything about it. And it's still odd to me to this day because we did have some experience with it. Because at one point when we moved back to California, my mom quit interior decorating, and instead of going back to nursing right away, she went to work at a nursing home, and we'd go visit her occasionally there. And there were people there that were clearly having Alzheimer's or dementia, people that she said, yeah, you need to stay away from them. They can get pretty violent. So as a kid, I saw there's elderly people that have problems, but I didn't really know what it was, right? I'm a educated guy. I've been around a lot of things, but had not been around dementia. Didn't have it in our family at all. So it was pretty foreign to me. And certainly how to cope with it was incredibly foreign. We talked about, me having a cold on here because I'm always being taught by life to be more patient. Well, um, that was part of this journey, was learning to relearn things, right? And you can't always have the answers, right? In fact, most times you don't have the answers. The answers you do have aren't the right ones. Um, Terry, as an example, we'd explain to her, Mom, yeah, well, Terry passed this morning and it was peaceful and she's in heaven and she's not struggling anymore. Well, that worked for a while. And then pretty soon it came to, you're hiding her from me. This true dementia, right? This paranoia that we're out to get her kind of thing, when you know in your heart that's the furthest thing from your mind, right? It's That's the hard thing, is I think the internal struggle to figure out how to convey love to someone who is not really arguing with your love. They're arguing with something that you don't even understand, right? It's
Right.
not
Yeah.
about them not being who they are inside. It's just it's changing for them. And the key, the things just don't fit anymore, right? That used to fit. And I remember the many times where I would say something to her and she might pause and I could literally see like the fear just wash over her face. Like she somehow knew something's missing, but she didn't know what it was, and she certainly didn't know how to talk about it, right? It'd be great if we could all be, well, let's treat her like a therapist. Well, tell me what's going on for you, Betty, right? It wasn't possible because she didn't even know herself. You guys know that.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do. Now, did your mother get any formal diagnosis? Do you know what kind of dementia it was?
Not formal in terms of the type. We eventually went to the doctor after a lot of episodes, and she did diagnose her as dementia. Um, he did several tests along the way. He happened to be a good friend of the family. He was my sister's doctor forever, and I said he'll be safe, right? We went in there and I actually wrote about it in the book, and he was incredibly kind and gentle. And he said, yeah, this is what you got. And we talked about, okay, we got a diagnosis. So what are the drugs? What do we do? And he said, there really aren't any great drugs for this, right? And side effects are really not good. So he prescribed Ativan and Seroquel, mood stabilizers, and Depakote. And there's an interesting side story about Depakote if we get there, but yeah, that was all there was. So it
Mm.
was great to know what it was. There was some measure of relief there. And then it was like we went off the falls. It's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Right. Because even in the early stages, when she was incredibly violent and throwing things and, cursing at us, and like we were the enemy for sure. Right. And she was a pretty powerful woman. We had decided that we were going to do our very best to never put her in a facility. So we had decided that that was something that was important to her, because it was funny, ironically, when she was younger, I used to say, Mom, the minute you'd go sideways, I'm putting you in a home. She goes, you are not going to do it. It was a joke we had. So we were pretty adamant about not doing that. But the diagnosis and the great unknown about what we were headed towards, all in every facet you can think of, like how bad is this going to get? You don't want to let go. Is she going to die? Of course she's going to die, but when is she going to die? Like all these things, like the emotional roller coaster was unbelievable, right? And you find out, I think, as you certainly know, you find out you're much more resilient than you think, right? Because you're committed to not giving up, and so you find, I mean, I guess to some degree it's not a whole lot different than when my dad had cancer. Like there was some point where we knew we weren't going to win this battle, and we stayed, right? Painful, horrible to stay, but the only thing you can really do, and ultimately the greatest gift that you could give to somebody, is that unconditional love. I remember being in the hospital with my dad, and he had a big mess from he had C. diff from the chemotherapy, and I'm like, Dad,
Mm,
don't worry, I'll take care of this. And he's like, you can't do this. I said, Dad, you did it for me when I was a kid. This is the cycle, right? Um, and in some ways, as I recall a lot of the events along the way, just a beautiful gift that was given to me to have the opportunity to care. Um, because it's we all lose loved ones. We never want to. And you can go through a myriad of regrets and memories that I wish I would have been more there. I wish I would have done more there. I could easily say, well, I still have those moments that I wish I would have spent more time. I left it all on the table, right? She knew to her very last breath that she was loved. And
yeah,
I don't know that there's anything in life that is more relevant than that. I don't know whoever coined the phrase, the most important things in life aren't things, but they were spot on, right? And it's so for me, that was part of the journey, and for my sister, um, and family who was not there, right? I
right,
have a brother that lived in California and a sister lived in California, and there were times that we would be really frustrated and go, why aren't they here? And you realize that we don't even understand what their world's like, that they can't be there because of geographical distance and the pain they're going through and all
Mhm.
those kind of things. And the shock when they did come to visit, they were like, oh my God, even though we'd
right.
be telling them things, wow,
Right.
what's going on? Right. So it's and I've had many people have that conversation with me, like, my brother won't do anything. And I'm like, yeah, before you spend a lot of time there, because it won't do you any good, his world is his world, and you don't know what he's going through. And the biggest thing that I realized, it came to me because someone said, be very careful when you write the chapter about family because you don't want to alienate people. And I didn't want to do that anyway, but I was like, how am I going to do this and still tell the truth about how the distance hurts and all these other kind of things? And I realized in the end, no one made me be here. I
Right.
made this choice completely on my own,
Yes.
and it was very freeing
Yeah.
Mm.
because all the bitterness and the misplaced anger and frustration just went away because I realized, yeah, I did this on my own. So
Mhm.
that was super helpful to me and to my sister.
I think you bring up a really, really good point, and that is when you say we don't know what someone else's world is like because we're not in it, and there
Right.
can be all kinds of reasons, and the reasons could be geographical. The reasons they could live around the block and still not be there, and but we're quick to make meaning out of that and say, well, it's because of this, it's because of that. But in the end, like you said, it was your choice to be there, and that, and you brought that to your mother, and it was a gift for you. Forcing other people to do things the way we do them is not always a great, it doesn't always yield great results, is what I want to say. I want
No.
to, and I say that because I know some of our listeners might be feeling this way too, that, oh, my siblings aren't helping, or my whoever isn't helping. And people help when they can, and how they can. And asking someone to do something outside of their ability isn't necessarily going to give you what you're hoping it's going to do. They're not going to show up and be just like you. That's the thing. They're
Yeah,
not
we're
going
all
to show up
built
and be like you.
differently.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Most important.
and some people weren't built for this. I
Yes.
before I started seriously finishing the book, I had talked to a publisher's agent or something in Portland. Somebody connected me to her, and she said, if you can be with somebody when they die, we don't do that much in the United States. It'll change your life forever. And I had done that with my grandfather and my father, and then with my mother and my sister, obviously. Um, and I'm like, I understand how that is, and I also understand that not everybody's built for that. Not
Right.
everybody can handle
Right.
that. The things that they don't want to remember that last day, right? I don't spend my time remembering my mom's last breath. I remember it to the detail, but that's not how I see it. I don't. think that's not my last memory of my mom or my last memory of my dad. And I think I have been given that gift by God or whoever, right, um, to be able to have that perspective, right? And so I
Mhm.
could give that to her, and they were super supportive in the ways that they were. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
calling regularly, and the stuff that they didn't get, because there were the times when my mom would speak on the phone. Other times she just put the phone down and walk away.
Right,
They're like,
right,
"Hey,
Right.
what happened?" I said, I don't know, right?
right.
We we eventually found some real joy for them, I think, with FaceTime on an iPad.
Mm.
Um, so they could see her, right? And that worked for her too. Like she didn't totally understand it at first, but she said, "That's Tim. Oh, that's Tim." And I'm like, "It is, it's Tim." So thank God for some technology that we didn't have way back when. We certainly had, and we used it whenever we were able.
To go
That's
back to what you said about how your mom knew that she was loved, because in the essay that you wrote for us, which is on our website, um, you said your mother knew that she was loved, but she didn't know why, and she didn't have to. And I just thought, like, I'd never thought of that. And I've been through a lot of these books and these stories and these authors, so nobody's ever quite said that. But I found that to be very profound. That it wasn't necessary for her to understand why she was loved, but that she was loved. Can you explain that a little more? What did you mean by that?
I think one of the analogies I think of Marianne is thinking of a child, right? When they're first
Mhm.
born,
Mhm.
there's a comfort that they have. They don't know what love is. It's not defined, but the embodiment of love that's extended to them, it bridges all that, right? There's a sense, there's a feeling, there's an emotion. All the senses pick it up. It's something that is comforting and safe. Um, and I think it embodies all those types of things. And I think um, that's what my mom experienced in the tirades and the crazy emotions. I was always the one who could give my mom peace, and I wasn't always successful. We used a lot of humor and things of that nature, but when things came undone, my sister would say, "I need you to come over. I need you to come over right now." And I'd come over, and we would eventually work through it because there were times when I was able to disarm her. And I'll give you one example that tells of the horror that can go on here. We were in the midst of changing caregivers. We had a wonderful caregiver who was with us for the first 6 months. Her name was Michelle, and she was from Africa, and she had this sweet accent about her, and my mom just took to her, and Michelle obviously knew what she was doing. Well, she was diagnosed with cancer about 6 months in at the age of 32, and she passed away. So we lost her,
Oh,
which was
God.
horrible for her, horrible family, and us, right? So then there was a few that came and went, and we were with an agency at the time, and they hired some horrible people that just weren't suited to the job. One of which fell asleep on the couch, and my mom got out and walked down the street in her pajamas with the dog. And I'm like, What's going on?" Well, during this transition, we had a new woman that was coming who wound up being our main caregiver for a long time. Her name was Karina, and she was there that day. And my mom was unhinged. And by the time I got over there, um, it was bad, right? So um, you have to be very careful in these things because you're not allowed to restrain people. You're not allowed to do any of those things. So what I would do with my mom, I learned a habit of kind of going, "Mom, I'm sitting in front of you here, and as soon as you take this pill, I'll go away. I hate you." She's spitting at me. She's throwing punches at me. She's saying everything in the book. The lady who was sitting next to her was the one who was outgoing, and she was very awful. And she's sitting there like she knows exactly what to do, right? And my mom turns to her and says, "If I had a knife, I would take it and I would cut through his head until it fell off." And I laughed. I said, "Well, I'm glad we hid the knives, right?" I mean, it's just the way this kind of sardonic humor that happens. My mom was a nurse, so we had weird senses of humor anyway. And I just kept staying the course and staying the course. I said, "Look, I know you think I'm a bastard. I know you think all these things you're saying. I got it. I got it. I probably am. As soon as you take this, I'll go away. I'll leave you alone. And she's like, and then eventually, hours into this, she'd say, "You're gonna go?" I'm like, "Yeah." It was just a test of wills, right? And she had an amazing one. And then she'd take it. She's okay, you got to go. And I'd say, well, just a few more minutes, right? She took the Ativan. And the funny thing, I don't know how this is true for everybody or not, but afterwards, my mom would take a nap. It could be a 20-minute nap. It didn't matter. She'd wake up. She was good as new. No idea that any ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
And poor Karina, and God bless Karina, is like, oh, please don't leave, right? Because she's seeing this horrible first day. And she just grew to just love my mom. Like she weathered that like it was anything. And she's like, I've never seen anything like that in my life. And I'm like, it doesn't make me anything other than I love my mom. So you talk about love, like that's the love right there that you stay in the face of the storm. Because the first thing you want to do is run away, right? But you can't. Um, Necessity is always the mother of invention when it comes to dementia, and you better be prepared to think outside the box because um, you got to come up with something new. I've heard it said about Jack Russell dogs. You can never use the same thing to train them twice because they're too smart. Dementia is the same way. You really have to find ways to meet them where they're at, and through Karina and others, the art of redirection. It took me forever to learn that because I always wanted to explain, Mom, you understand this can't be this way, and it only make her more mad. Um, and I was like, well, I don't understand. Why can't you understand this? Right? It took me a while to learn that, which was I'm a slow learner, I guess. I don't know.
No, I hear you, but this is so true of so many people going through this journey is we keep going back to our abilities, right? And we have to unlearn. We have to unlearn and realize, oh, we have to learn another way. And it's very foreign, that feeling of, you mean I'm not going to correct that person? You mean I'm not going to tell them the real truth? You mean I'm not going to, that I can't lie and that's not right. Yeah, you just have to unlearn. And so yeah, we want to just if I could just reason with them and
Yes,
it doesn't
reason is not your friend
it
for
doesn't
sure.
really that's not what's at play right now. It's
Yeah,
connection and how do we find a way to connect?
yeah.
Yeah, so true. So many hard won lessons. Very
Yeah.
Oh,
true.
yeah, absolutely amazing things that happened. It will never leave me. It's been 4 years since she passed. I'm almost finished with the Audible version of the book, and it's taken us a while to get through it. But even going through that, and my audio engineer is like, "No, don't stop when you start crying. Just go through it." Right? It's like he said,
Sure.
"This is real." Right? He said,
Yeah.
and that's the one thing I've heard from countless people who've read my book is like, "Well, you don't shy away from any of the real stuff," and I'm like, "That's what it is." I
Well, why
mean,
would you?
yeah,
It
Yeah.
wouldn't be
it's
helpful if you did. How does that help anybody?
Right.
yeah, it would be nice if it were a pretty story about how we all lived happily ever after, but
Right.
um, luckily we did live happily ever after. But it was because we were able to, stay in the storm, which was as you guys have both endured. When I spoke to Jean early on, and she said to me, "Yeah, both my parents were diagnosed with Alzheimer's on the same day," and I'm like, okay, I don't even have a story. Mine is nothing compared to that. I don't even know where to begin with that one. So and there's so many people going through it, and you can just see it in their eyes. They're tired and they're confused themselves about
Yeah.
what to do, and how do I keep caring, and how do I do this in a way that's going to be, how do I give them some dignity? How do I do
Right.
any of these things, right? That we all want to do for our loved ones, but it's not an easy thing for sure.
And I
Mhm.
think that's why books like yours are so important. I do want to give you a chance to read a little bit for us. So do you have a selection you can read for
I
us?
I do.
Okay.
I was thinking about one of the ones that I think is probably poignant for everybody to learn is our first visit to the doctor around all this, which we weren't sure we were prepared for, but we were definitely looking for help. So what precedes this is trying to get my mom to stop driving. And at one point, I said, well, I'll let her registration expire and her license expire. I'm done. Then I'll take her down to DMV and they could say, oh, you got dementia. You can't do this. Well, unbeknownst to me, I called DMV and said, hey, here's what's going on. Wink, wink, right? And they said, well, if she just comes down and passes the vision test, we'll give her license back. I'm like, what? No, 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 no. You can't do that, right? So that's what was preceding this, just for context. Um, as frustrating as it had been to have the DMV employee refuse to help me in my scheme to stop mom from driving without being the bad guy, we could no longer deny that what he told us was true. It was time to take mom to see a doctor. We knew this would be challenging. Mom had been a nurse for nearly 40 years. She knew medicine. And as she mentioned previously, she had a sixth sense about things we were trying to hide from her. We told her we were taking her for a routine checkup. As expected, she resisted. I'm healthy. I don't need any damn doctors, she railed. Mom, would you just humor me a little here? I begged, my tone implying that I didn't think she needed to go either. I explained that her primary care doctor was pressuring us to bring her in, and could she just do us a little favor for her son? I'll treat you to dinner afterward, I promised. Begrudgingly, she agreed. When we arrived, I helped her out of the car while Mary went to check her in. She explained our situation very clearly to the nurse and warned her not to mention any drugs, since Mom was convinced we'd been trying to drug her ever since we'd attempted to give her some Ativan after Terry's funeral. Walking into the clinic, Mom grumbled about the horrid lighting and the nasty color of the carpet, but if anyone heard her, they didn't let on. Her grumbling continued as the nurse walked us back to see the doctor. First stop, the scale. Mom stepped on, muttering to herself under her breath. The nurse cheerfully adjusted the weights. 150 pounds, she reported. That's not right, Mom barked. Damn thing's broken. Mary and I exchanged glances. Mom had gained over 30 pounds. The nurse just smiled and proceeded to lead us to the examination room. Mom went in, followed by Mary. I stopped the nurse at the door, whispering, please, remember, do not say anything about the drugs. The nurse nodded. She would remember. After closing the door, the nurse flipped open Mom's chart. So I see you're taking, and she proceeded to rattle off several prescriptions. Mom gave the nurse uh, a once over, shook her head, and sighed like she was dealing with an especially dense child. No, she said, I'm not taking any of those. What on earth, I wondered. I asked her just to keep quiet about the medication, and she nodded. Thankfully, Mom dismissed the remark as incompetence on the part of the nurse, who took Mom's blood pressure and said the doctor would be right in. I stepped outside and waited for the doctor while Mary sat with Mom in the room. Dr. S was a very kind, soft-spoken man. He'd been one of Terry's doctors, so we were well acquainted. We shook hands, and he attentively asked me what was going on with Mom. I explained what we'd been going through and all the behavioral changes we'd been seeing. After chatting with him for a few minutes, I felt my anxiety dissipate somewhat. Dr. S was more than competent and confident. I knew Mom was in good hands. He opened the door and walked in. Hi, Betty Jane. How are you today? Hi, Dr. S, she replied. Betty Jane, do you know what year it is? She looked confused by the question and kind of let out a nervous laugh. I can't quite remember. Another nervous smile. 1995? My gut twisted with dread, but I kept my composure. Mom nervously glanced at Mary and me and then sort of tipped her chin upwards to suggest the question didn't mean anything. Dr. S asked a few more questions. When were you born, Betty Jane? Confusion. Can you tell me what month it is? She couldn't. Who's the President of the United States? Mom could only correctly report her date of birth. Throughout the rest of the doctor visit, Mom sat perfectly still. If she was listening to the doctor and discussing her symptoms and diagnosis with Mary and me, I had no way of knowing. Her expression was unreadable. Definitely not shocked by what was being discussed. If anything, she took a look. She didn't look like she had a care in the world. Dr. S formally diagnosed Mom with dementia. He discussed how the unpredictability we grappled with over the past month lined up perfectly with other patients' experiences. This was comforting to know in some small way, but beyond that, it appeared there wasn't much help to be had. We requested dementia-specific medication, but were told that such drugs were unproven and often came with negative side effects. Instead, he prescribed mood-stabilizing drugs and Ativan specifically. Mary asked if we could get the Ativan as a liquid to hide in Mom's coffee, as we anticipated she wouldn't take it willingly. The doctor agreed. That might have been the only good news he gave us that day. We asked a few questions about progression, but mostly we were too overwhelmed to form coherent thoughts. Our capacity to absorb and process the bad news became almost as limited as Mom's. This was, of course, our worst fear. It was the thing we'd never been able to bring ourselves to speak out loud. Within the span of a few minutes, Dr. S. the word dementia instantaneously and irrevocably answered every mystery we tried to solve so hard on our own. Unfortunately, it was also the word that gave solid shape to the path before us.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's very poignant. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, so during the journey, especially after this point, how did you go about educating yourself? Did you read books? Did you listen to podcasts? Did you join a support group? Any of those things?
We really didn't. And I think the only book that my sister had read was A 36-Hour Day. I had
Mhm.
a young child. I was a single father. I had a big job, was traveling all over the country. And I think we were, I don't know if we were stubborn or what it was. And we certainly weren't aware of anything, right? And I
Mhm.
think dementia isn't something like I wouldn't say I was ever embarrassed about my mom. We took her out lots in public places, took her to one of my daughter's plays and experienced all the antics that go with that. And we weathered those things fine, but it was like I didn't want to reach out and go, "What do you do with dementia? What happens here?" Which is obviously something you guys deal with every day and have provided all these resources for people. But I just was unaware of how prevalent it was. I had a guy that I had worked with at a company for years. And I had, when I was leaving my job, I told him I'm leaving and I said, I'm going to work on this book a little bit. And he said, "What's the book about?" I said, "Dementia." He said, "Do you know what I do in the off time?" I said, "I don't have any idea." He's on a board of a place called Hearts and Minds in San Jose, and they've been dealing with dementia in some really creative ways for about 40 years. But until you let the cat out of the bag, you don't know. And I wasn't aware of how much I wasn't telling my friends. My dearest friend in the world lives in Canada, and I was up visiting, and he had read my book, and we had been out, and I came into his house, and he was already in here, and he was just bawling, and he hugged me, and he said, "I had no idea what you went through. I had no idea." And we're close friends, and I'm not a keep it to myself kind of guy. I would say I'd rather listen to somebody else's problems and help them than talk about mine. But I had assumed that we must have discussed it, but we didn't. So I would say, as sad as that is, probably for my mom along the way, sometimes a lot of trial and error, right? And we just learned along the way what was working and what wasn't, and the caregivers themselves who were very skilled at explaining stuff to her and explaining stuff to us about redirection and kind of modeling that what was working, right? Because I mean, Karina, for example, I don't know in the entire time that Karina was with us if my mom ever had one of her huge explosive episodes. And I would come in the house from the garage and I would hear them roaring with laughter. I mean, just roaring with laughter. Um, she had a touch. Sure, we're still very close to her today. Um, but her magic with my mom for redirection and making it fun for her, um, it wasn't fun. I mean, at some point we started changing diapers. None of this stuff is fun, but there was a lightheartedness that she approached this with that was just amazing. And there's places in here where the humor is crazy. There one time when my mom was just soaked to the bone. It was a Saturday morning, and it was probably maybe a year before she passed away. And my sister called me and said, "Dave, you got to come over. I can't get her changed." So I was coming over anyway. I had other plans, but I was coming over anyways, is what I told her. And I came over and I walk in and she's sitting on the table. And um, my mom says, "Mary wants me to change. And I don't need to change. I'm fine." I'm like, "Okay." So I have all these weird accents and things I've learned over the years, and I started playing with accents and playing with her and getting her changed. And she's laughing hysterically. And she'd say to my sister, "He's such an asshole," but she's laughing. And it took, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of an hour and a half to 2 hours of going through this, but eventually she changed. It wasn't the butting heads kind of thing, which we had done many times before. Like, you have to do this. It didn't have to be about that at all. And it was, the humor was so disarming for her. It was just a magic elixir because we'd always shared that growing up. And I'm kind of a funny guy. I like to laugh and make people laugh. And it was just a brilliant thing there. So, Marianne was 7, almost 8 years. And how did we do on the time scale of what we should have? Could I have learned a lot more, a lot sooner? Absolutely. And I wish I would have. I don't know, though. For me, I'm kind of a self-made guy. I need to figure stuff out on my own sometimes. I don't know if I would have read something and tried to just emulate that or what I would have done, but I didn't really have that body of stuff. The doctor was great because he was just so easy. And it was very disarming to my mom and that was, I think, one of the most powerful things we learned is like, the less you get agitated about it, the less they get agitated about it.
Oh,
And
yeah. Yeah.
I remember countless times my mom said, "Oh, I got to go see my dad. Can we go see him? Mom, he lives in Lodi. It's a long drive. Let's go tomorrow. Can we go tomorrow? I'm just kind of tired. It's late in the day." She's like, look at me like, "Are we really going to go?" I'm like, "Of course. I haven't seen granddad in years." Obviously, it had been passed for probably 35, 40 years. And she was like, "Ah, okay." I'm like, "You good now? You sure? No worries?" And she's like, "I've got a recording of this very thing." She looks at me
Yeah.
and she goes, "No worries." And I went and of course the next day she forgot about it. But we were at stages before where my sister would pull out an announcement for his funeral to prove that he had passed away. Well, you guys know about dementia. That's about the dumbest thing in the world you could do because they're not going to believe it. And it only makes things worse because they don't want to know that. Um, it's all about meeting them where they're at, right? And that's not an easy thing to learn, but we definitely learned it. And I would dare say, I think we got really good at it in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people recommend in a situation like that to redirect by saying, tell me about your dad. Do you remember a funny story? Or, wasn't he a
Yeah.
fisherman? Did he like to fish? Oh yeah, then they'll tell you, go off on stories and forget all about the fact I want to go there.
Yeah. Because we don't know what's
Mm,
firing in there, right? Whatever it
mm,
is,
about that
it's not
flow.
anything that we understand, but it was a brilliant thing. I think the only place I ever stopped her short pretty consistently is she said, "I think your dad has another woman." I said, "Mom, I'm just going to tell you that's not the case."
That's a common thing. That's a very common on both sides, men and women, thinking that their spouse has somebody else. It's funny. I wanted to ask you, Dave, because I think in your essay you said that your mom died in 2020, which was during the heart of the pandemic, and how did that affect your family? Was that a concern or?
It was definitely a concern for me. I mean, I took Terry's role of I'm going to protect her at any cost.
Mhm.
I know we're close because in January timeframe, she had become actually in November it started where she became pretty nonverbal. She just couldn't like she'd try to get things out, and then eventually she just stopped trying. Like she knew she couldn't speak anymore. But I'm like, nobody's coming in and out of this house unless we're absolutely sure because COVID was very alarming. It was much more alarming than it wound up being in some facets, not for some people because a lot of people passed away from it, et cetera. But it was manageable for us more than I knew. And I'm like, Karina, if you feel sick, I'll do it. Whatever it is we have to do. And we actually lost one of our caregivers because in September of that year, I called hospice and because she stopped walking. And like Mary called me one day and she said, "Mom can't walk anymore." I'm like, "What? Did something happen?" And I went over and she said, "I can walk fine." I said, "Well, tell you what, you know how this goes. If you can get up and walk for me, we're good. Otherwise, I'm calling the paramedics." "I don't need any paramedics." I'm like, "You heard me. This is the way this is going to be. This is the way this goes. You know it." and she couldn't. And so we took her, she went to the hospital and they put her in the neuro ward, which was, it was hysterical. I mean, I was so exhausted. I stayed the night, but it was absolutely hysterical because the nurse came in to do tests, right, in the middle of the night. And she said, okay, don't look at my fingers and tell me how many I got up. And she'd go, 5, 5. And then she said, can you say the sentence for me? And she said it in an accent. And the nurse and I are just laughing our tails off. And she knew it. She was playing with this the whole time. Um, in the morning, physical therapy came. Guess what? She could walk again. That lasted about a week. And then she couldn't do it. So I made the call that I never wanted to make to hospice, which was so dumb on my part. They were so amazing. They brought in the hospital bed, and my mom's house looked out over the city, so we put it in the living room. They gave us supplies, CNA support, nursing. They're angels. I mean, they're absolute angels, right? Um, so we had all that in place beforehand. So they were very apt at making sure that no one was going to be infecting her with COVID. And it was just a very relentless approach to everybody's washing their hands. And of course, we had to find ways to get hand sanitizer because it was all gone. Right. So Mary bought alcohol and aloe vera gel. You know, and we grabbed it all that we could. So we got it. So we were very resourceful in making sure we had the things to help prevent an infection as much as possible. And of course, she never got it. She was good, and it was it was a lot of false starts where Mary and I'd look at each other and go, "Oh, I think we're getting close. I think this is going to be it." In fact, there was a business trip I took in November, and I couldn't think of any reason not to take it. And we were like, "What do you think?" She said, "I don't think you should go." And it's the story about Depakote, which is just crazy. We'd been giving her a single dose. She could have had double. I had gone to Dallas. Nothing happened. I came back on Friday, grabbed a bottle of wine from my pantry, came over, and I was going to hang out and watch a movie with Mary and my mom. And um, I walked into the house, and she's like, "David, how are you?" And I'm like, "What?" Uh, and I go in the kitchen, and my sister was in there with her fiance. And I said, "What's going on?" She said, "Well, the nurse asked if she could give her the second dose of Depakote." Like, it never did any good, but sure, go ahead. For 3 days, two and a half, I sat down with my mom that night. She said, I've really faded a lot, haven't I? I mean, we had this magical moment that was coherent, lucidity, everything, right? And must have talked to her for an hour, and of course told her all how much I loved her and how lucky I was, all those things that I'd wanted to do, even though she knew it anyway. My brother was in Atlanta. I got him on the FaceTime so he could talk to her. And I didn't even want to leave that night because I thought, oh, this is a rally before she goes. And eventually my sister and I said, I'll be right here. I'll call you, whatever. It lasted about 2.5 days, and then it faded, and she went back to being nonverbal again. And but it was this amazing, like, how did this even happen? Um, this crazy occurrence that happened.
Mm.
And then we went to things where I would sit with her because there was a fireplace in that room, and I'd make a big fire, and I would read her Hope for the Flowers or Chronicles of Narnia or Winnie the Pooh or anything else. And I would sit holding her hand, and she'd every now and then I was reading her. I think it was a Winnie the Pooh thing where they were chasing a woozle or whatever it was. And she's like, "Are they going to be okay?" And I'm like, "They're going to be okay." And she goes, "Well, how do you know?" "We've read this before, Mom." And then she's like, "Okay, right." But it was like I'm blessed with like a child, right? Um, and we did that for I don't know for how many months, right? And she was still cognizant of us and awake until like the last 2 days. And even in those days where she never spoke anymore, didn't even try, her eyes could just, oh, I could, it was still there. It was still the sparkle, right? And she would just be happy for you just to sit there and hold her hand, right? And we rolled her to change her. And when she was still verbal, she's like, "This is bullshit." I said, "Yeah, it is, Mom, but we're almost done. And this is all we got. And she'd laugh. Like she became very compliant, right? And we became really good at it. And we had, between Karina and my sister and I, she was bathed in love. And I gotta say again, the hospice people were caring. They weren't doing a job. It's a mission for them. So she was just surrounded in that, which was um, just a beautiful thing. And for all my efforts of being mechanical and whatever, she had this hospital bed, and I actually had my sister's fiance help me move it so it was close to the Christmas tree. Well, there were wheels on it. I'm like, how does this thing work? The day before she passed, she passed in April, and it was chilly, but it was sunny outside on the deck. And I'm like, oh, the wheels just go in here. So I got the wheels in, pushed her bed out in the sun. She was already, in a coma at this point, but I could see her kind of just arch towards the sunshine. And so her last few days were just like that. And then the last day was very strange for me because my mom firmly believes in God. And I think there'd be zero doubt in her mind that she was going to heaven. But her passing took like 6 hours. She'd take a really deep breath and then let go. And I'm like, that's it. And it wasn't. And I was always puzzled by that. And I talked to a pastor friend of mine. He said, everybody kind of goes in their own time. He used an analogy with my dad, who had a similar experience. He said, when you take a trip, sometimes you got to pack your bags. That's what Betty was doing. And she was a fighter. She didn't want to let go of you guys either. So all of this was like this insane learning that still goes on to this day when I reflect back, things that I like, wow, just an amazing life lesson, right? That makes it seem so truncated and very well, life lesson, but it's a life lesson, right? It's your whole life that you learn that hopefully lives with me and everything else I do. For me, that's the best thing I've got. If I can extend that to other people, because people said, well, why'd you write the book? And I'm like, I just had to get it out. That was the original thing. It was just really selfish for me. Now I'm finding out that it's doing really good things for other people, for them to feel like someone has a shared experience. So
Mhm.
it's a
Sure.
crazy thing.
Yeah, people, I think, they gravitate toward other people's stories because then they know that if this person got through this, then I can too. Because they feel so hopeless, like there's no way out, and and then it's cathartic for the author. The author experiences grief release, just
Yeah.
like you did when you started writing it, and because you can't go through that when you're in the midst of it. You can't, try to sweat it out and figure out what is going on. It's beyond that. So when it's over, now you sit back and you take a breath and say, okay, this is what happened. And when you write it down like that, it's a great resource for your family, for everybody to see. And then, of course, for other people as well.
Yeah, I was wondering how that was going to work with my family, because I was like, it was very honest, right? And
Yeah.
how are
Yeah.
people going to feel about this? And my brother in particular had said, he said there were some really hard parts in there. Like, there were, right? And we didn't ever discuss it as to what it was for him. I suspect some of it was wishing he would have been there. Other parts, just the sheer sorrow of what was going on for all of us, right?
Yeah.
And this kind of thing, reading this kind of thing is so personal for everybody, and we're all so different in how we see things, and our life experiences are different. Um, it's if people can take it in and without being judged themselves or any of those kind of things, because there's just no place for it. Because if I had a nickel for every time I made a mistake, I'd have a big jar of nickels, right? One of the ones that always sticks in my mind that isn't, I don't feel guilty about it anymore, but I wish I would have made a different decision. One day I was getting ready to go, and my mom said, hey, you can stay. And I said, well, yeah, I got to take care of the dogs and I got to pick up Sophia from school. And she's like, no, I mean, you can just come here and stay. all she wanted was for me to stay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you have life and you have to go on. So it's those are the hard parts.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. It
Happy
was
to.
lovely to hear. And can you tell people where they can find your book and where they can find you online?
DavidBredbenner.com. And Going Home is at Amazon, and it is in Barnes and Noble and all the various resellers that are out there. The Audible version will be out prior to I think this podcast is going to air in April. Is that right?
Yes, early April.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Audible version will be out prior to then. Um, and if they're interested in knowing more, they can reach out to my website, and I have a publicity person who takes care of that stuff for me. And I've done some speaking things and other things that people want that kind of thing. It's always available to them. I'm always happy to share what I can. And I and I wouldn't say I'm a resource that this isn't my day job, right? This is what I do as a side thing. But I've told people that like especially work colleagues, because it came out and people like, hey, can I talk to you? I'm like, sure. What do you need? Right. Like call me. I'm happy to do that. So if there's people who need that kind of thing, I'm happy to help as I'm able. Because you can just email me at my site. And this is we're supposed to be a community. Um, and the more we can help each other, I think the better we all fare.
That's so generous and so wonderful. And I think and so thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. And that's certainly a why AlzAuthors exists. We are building the village that we seem to have lost, and telling our stories is a way to help other people all the time. So thank you for that. That's really
Yeah, I
powerful.
applaud what you guys are doing here. When Gene explained to me what it all was, I was like, that's all I could really say was just wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's
Mhm.
Thank you.
such a very cool, caring thing to do, to extend to people. And You guys have had your own journeys, and you know how valuable it is. And I applaud you for your work that you do. That's all volunteer, I know, and I just think it's amazing.
Well, thank you
Okay.
so much, Dave.
Thank
Okay.
you very much. I
All
appreciate
right.
all the time and all the support.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Norms. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here. I can't wait to tell you all about it.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually called World Walks Against Dementia.
Okay.
And how it came about very quickly was we run several memory cafes, but we run a memory cafe in Turkey where I live. And we have a sponsored walk every year to pay for the memory cafe because nobody's paid in our organisation. We're all volunteers. There's nobody gets a wage for what we do. So we have to raise funds to keep things open. And it's been very successful. Because of what I do worldwide, other than Southeast Asia, they had a sponsored walk last year. And it was so successful. I thought, I'm sure we could do this. Because we've held a World Rock Against Dementia for the last 12 years, where countries from all over the world have joined in with World Rock Against Dementia. Why can't we have a World Walks Against Dementia? So I thought about it for a little while and thought, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I announced it in January. I think it was late December, early January. And I am so pleased to say now that we've got 23 countries signed up already. It's happening all over the world. We have places in America, Washington, New York, Lewy bodies, Norma, Luby, is it Norma, who runs the Lewy bodies office at New York. She's joining Curry Wise Nut, Daisy Best, Oklahoma. It's all over the place in America. But we've also got Canada, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, obviously England. We've got Australia, we've got France, we've got Germany, We've got, I always think of Africa as one country, but it's not. It's many countries. We've got Zambia, we've got Nigeria, we've got Cape Town, we've got, it's just, it's incredible. And to think that on this particular date, or thereabouts, but on the date of September 7th, 2025, the whole world from different countries will be doing the same thing. And it's absolutely mind-blowing to think that we'll all be doing the same thing against the fight against dementia. And we even got the T-shirts printed, and yeah, incredible. It's so exciting.
That is exciting. I'm so happy for you and the way that it took off. And the only, one of the reasons why it took off is because of you, Norms, and your work in dementia world. So I know it's not easy. And
No, it's not. It can be quite tough at times. But we've done lots of things. Excuse me. We've done lots of things. And we've been quite successful. We've done some things that's been absolutely awful. And it didn't work. And we're the first to admit it. We had Purple Angel holidays, where you went to hotels and it was dementia friendly, and we had all the websites set up. It didn't work. There wasn't a market for it, and the logistics to it was horrendous. And even though deep down I still wish it had, but we do have things that don't work. We were very successful with the GPS. Yeah, we had a very successful campaign with GPS, which the UK NHS took up. And out of 600 people and 50 people went missing, we found 650 people.
Oh my goodness.
Well, our backer was a millionaire, but after 3 years, he decided to go and play somewhere else. So we lost the funding, but that was very successful. But that was a sad day where we lost the funding for that, because we were finding people that was missing, And then obviously the Purple Angels known worldwide. We're in 64, 65 countries worldwide. And so that was obviously the next step for a world walk against dementia. And we just want to do it because I've always had this dream of the world standing up, holding hands virtually and saying, listen, we're not going to put up with this anymore. We're going to stand together. And we're going to do this together, and we're going to show the world that it's just another disease. We're going to drag dementia kicking and screaming into the 21st century and lay it bare for what it really is, which is just another illness and nothing to be frightened of. And that's the reason why we're doing it. And that's the reason why I'm doing this with you, and why I hope lots of people see this and contact me and they'll join in. Our walk's only 3 miles. It doesn't have to be 26 miles. Doesn't have to be a marathon.
That's right.
We have people with wheelchairs. We have people bring the dogs and and stuff like that. It's only a small walk.
That's
right. It's a small walk around a big old world, and that's what we're looking forward to.
Now, how would people get involved in this if they wanted to find out if there's something going on in their community? What would they do?
Facebook page. There's a World Walks Against Dementia Facebook page up and running. It's been up and running. All they've got to do is contact us there. They can read the information where it's about. You can read all the information down the side there. And then you just go on, join, and go on and tell us where you are and what you're doing. And we don't care if it's walking around the block. We don't care if you're taking your dog out for your walk with your sister because you lost your mum. It doesn't matter how small or how big it is. We just want to see how many people and how many different towns and cities around the world we can get joined in.
All right. We will make sure that the website is in our show notes so people can find it.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're doing a sponsored walk because the money that we raise is for the MP3s. Because we give out free MP3s. But the beauty of this in this country and abroad, and like yourselves, if anybody wants to do a sponsored walk, they can do it for whatever charity they like. We don't mind. We're not precious. we know that there's lots of players that need lots of money. It's not about us. It's not about the Purple Angel. It's not about me. It's about coming together to show the world that we're going to fight against dementia. And if anybody around the world wants to make a little bit of money for their own charity, by doing it, all they've got to let us know is where you're going, what you're doing. And if you want to raise thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars, that's fine by us. As one famous person once said, we don't want your money. You know, we're all right. Well, you know, you raise as much as you can for your own charity, and that will be wonderful. That's present enough.
That's terrific.
Tell me again how many years you've been doing this. You've been doing this for a number of years, correct?
I've been dementia campaigner for about 15 years.
Okay,
The
fantastic.
Purple Angel's been going for 15 years.
Got it.
Before that, we were the Toy Bay Dementia Alliance, but that's a bit of a mouthful, and the world wouldn't really recognise that. So we had to have a logo. So we came up with the Purple Angel. So
Fantastic.
about 15 years, yeah.
That's wonderful.
We've opened memory cafes around the world, Nigeria, and we were one of the first to open a memory cafe in the USA, down in Minnesota for Lorena Bay.
Yeah.
You know, the lady who has the podcast, the site, and she was one of the very, very first. She asked us, how do you operate a memory cafe? Because they'd never heard of it. So we give her all the information, and she said, well, how much? We said, nothing. It's completely free. We're not charging. Yeah, we'd love you to do it. And now I believe there's about 1,500 all over America.
Yes.
There's lots and lots of memory cafes. So I like to think that we were helpful in the very beginning of that in the United States, because we've always had a great relationship with the States. And my tagline at home here is, it wasn't just the Beatles that cracked America, we did as well. So yeah.
I love that. Okay, I think we've got it all, right, Christy? Anything else we need to ask Norms?
If we could say the name of the website again.
Purple Angel. If you go onto Facebook, you will get the World Walks Against Dementia dedicated Facebook page, where you can register to join for the walk. September 7th, it's on a Sunday.
On a Sunday, 2025.
And then just give us all your pictures, all your videos, and send them all to the Facebook page, and we'll share them worldwide.
Oh, fantastic. I think that's fantastic. It's great to know. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you so much, Norms. It's good to see you, and
you're welcome.
Congratulations on all of this, and I can't wait to see how it all turns out.
So neither can I. I'm quite excited.
Yeah, then you do it all over again the next year.
Yeah, well, you never know, you know, God willing, yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. You have a lovely day.
Thank you.
And you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.